Hi there, welcome back to the channel. Today's episode is about 3 misconceptions about actually having a PhD. Now imagine 4 years of blood, sweat and tears to essentially get something like this. Now there's a lot of joy in completing, there's a lot of accolades and a lot of appreciation in terms of finishing a PhD. But there are actually a lot of misconceptions about life once you have a doctorate, once you have a PhD. And we're going to get straight into it now. So we all know doing a PhD is difficult, and when you get there, there's a lot of joy and appreciation in finishing, and rightly so. There are a lot of accolades in terms of the doctorate title, the achievement, the recognition. But there are a few misconceptions that people have within research and even outside of research about having a PhD. So I'm hoping to kind of dispel some of those misconceptions in today's video. And before I start, if you are new to the channel, I talk about research advice, top tips. So do be sure to subscribe, as you can see over here. Do give a like if you can, and then comment if you want some other type of videos or if you enjoyed today's video. But let's get into these 3 misconceptions. So the first misconception is when you finish a PhD, you are a world expert in a niche, not a field. I'm going to give you an example of the two. So my PhD, when I did mine, was in vascular pharmacology. So that was the field. Within pharmacology is actually the main field. The subset is vascular pharmacology. You can have respiratory pharmacology and all different sites. But my niche was actually within a very small part of vascular pharmacology. My work was looking at something known as anti-angiogenic therapy, looking at how we can stop new blood vessels from actually forming. Now, I know obviously quite a lot about this because obviously it was in my PhD, that's what my area was. But when I finished, I can't say I'm an expert in the field of vascular pharmacology because as you can see over here, these are all different themes, research areas within the field of vascular pharmacology. And I know nothing or barely minimal kind of understanding of each of these other areas. So there's a misconception that you're the world expert in a field, but it's more that you're an expert in a niche within a field. So whether it's astrophysics, computer science, cognitive psychology, archaeology, whether you're in business and law, or you're into hard sciences, or whether you're into more abstract thinking, in whatever area you're in, when you do your PhD, you're looking at something very particular within that area. So somebody who's done a PhD can't say they're an expert in computer science because computer science is such a vast field, nor with psychology. Even within cognitive psychology, there's certain areas. Just like within vascular pharmacology, there was cardiovascular sciences, there's tumor relations, there's angiogenesis, there's pure vascular, there's arterial stiffness, there's all of these exercise related, there's an abundance of different areas. So I think something I like to say is that when you finish a PhD, you're more of a niche expert as opposed to a field expert. And the closest you get to a field expert is somebody who's genuinely a professor, because they've worked in the field for 5, 10, sometimes even 20 years, even more. And they are quite a competent area of expertise within the field of, let's say, environmental chemistry, or, which is one of the colleagues that I know very well, or respiratory medicine, which is one of the consultants I work with, or airway disease. So these are people who are experts in pretty much that field. Now, nobody's truly an expert because you can never know everything about everything, but I would say professors in the academic sense are the closest example you can get. Now, number 2 is about the concept or misconception that if you have a PhD, you are more employable. Now, that is not often the case in the kind of majority of scenarios, because there's a difference between being employable and part of your job criteria or entry requirements. So many lectureships or many postdocs, they require you to have a PhD. So it doesn't matter whether you're employable or not, you need to have a PhD to get those jobs. So that's different. But if you're going to look at jobs outside of those jobs that require a PhD, so biomedical scientists, medical writing, industry, teaching, some lectureships, where even some cases PhD is desirable, sometimes you're caught in a grey area because this is a scenario when a lot of people who finish their PhD, They're looking for postdocs and they struggle, so they're looking for other jobs they can have in the meantime. Having the notion that you have a PhD can actually be a deficit because they see that you're overqualified for the role, for example, or you don't have the actual relevant experience for this particular role. So I'm going to give you now 2 examples of where a PhD doesn't actually help. So the first example is when somebody who I knew was applying for biomedical science, being a biomedical scientist. Now they did a degree in biomedical science, they did a PhD, and they wanted to go work back in hospital for a while before they went into other areas of work. And he was up against other people who have just graduated from biomedical science. Just because he had a PhD in a particular bioscience area did not mean in any way, shape, or form that he was more employable compared to somebody who has a placement. Why? That person without a PhD had more relevant and suited experience to that particular role. Even within medical writing, somebody who has a PhD compared to somebody who's got extensive track record in journalism or science journalism, they may be more suited for that role. And the other example I wanted to give you is where somebody was actually applying for a technician role. They wanted to find somewhere just before they look into postdocs or go into industry. And he actually hid his PhD in his job description and criteria and applications because it said most recent relevant work experience. Now, as I told you with the other example before, it's all about the relevant work experience. And sometimes your PhD is not actually relevant to the role. So he actually hid his PhD. He did nothing wrong. They asked for relevant work experience, so he gave something more suited. After he got the job, when they told him that if you were to tell us your recent relevant experience was PhD, we wouldn't have given you the job because you're overqualified or we think that you're going to go on to do other things, so you're not going to be able to stay here. So that's where a PhD can be at a deficit. There are many cases where doing a PhD can actually be favourable, but to say that having a PhD makes you more employable isn't quite accurate. And these are some examples that I've seen myself. So bear in mind that if your goals of doing a PhD, if you're not starting one, is to become more employable, there's probably better ways to do it. But if you want to do a PhD because you want to pursue science, you want to contribute to new knowledge, you want to go into academia, you want to go in some form of industry, you want to become an expert in the area, those are all the applicable reasons for doing a PhD. And I'll be doing a separate episode on reasons for doing a PhD quite soon. But I want to just dispel that rumour between PhD and employability. Before I go into the final misconception, I just want to stop and say, I hope you're doing okay. If you're struggling about research or anything in life in terms of finding things difficult, just drop me a message on Instagram. Just have a chat with me on the comments if you wanted to. Especially research related queries. If you're struggling with your PhD, if you're concerned about getting into a PhD or issues with your supervisors, just comment down below. Just DM me on Instagram because I'll be more than happy to help you. So if you're watching this video and you're a researcher, just get in contact because I would love to help. But back to the video, this final misconception is all about how universal a PhD is. Now, what I mean by this is in terms of it being a professional qualification. So we know that a PhD, having a doctorate, is a professional qualification, just like other degrees, other qualifications, associates, accreditations. But if you compare a PhD to other, you can say, qualifying practices, we have a misconception of actually how universal a PhD is. And this is kind of like a positive misconception compared to the other two. So let me set the scene for you now. If you look at most practicing qualifications, so medicine, dentistry, pharmacy, optometry, these are, especially because I'm based in the UK, the degrees that people go to acquire these very high ranked qualifications is only suited for them in this particular country. Now, if they were to practice that in another country, they will have to do some sort of conversion exams, another qualification perhaps, to be allowed to do that piece of work or that kind of job somewhere else. So their professional qualification is only accredited here or within the country that they did it, generally speaking. And if you look at other kind of non-patient facing, non-clinic, non-practice qualifications, so within business, within law, between psychology and other areas where you're not patient facing, there are also accreditations in there where it's only applicable to that particular country. Believe it or not, if you look at a PhD, Many people go on to postdocs and lectureships in completely different countries with the PhD they got from another country, meaning the PhD that they did in one area still holds value and still is recognized and accredited anywhere around the world, practically speaking and generally speaking. As I actually knew a lot of people within my PhD time who went on to postdocs in Canada, America, parts of Asia, parts of Africa, Australia, Russia, Eastern European areas, all over the world. And they didn't have to do something else that gave more accreditation to their PhD. The fact that they got a recognized PhD from a credible university was enough. So it kind of gives you an idea that a PhD is actually one of the most diverse and university recognized qualifications there is. Because you don't need to do some sort of conversion program to show that you can independently research. Because as you know, for many who may not know, a PhD is essentially showing an accredited body, can you research independently? That's your kind of trade of work. Somebody who does optometry, can they treat a patient independently in terms of correcting their eyesight or identifying eye disorders? Same with pharmacy. Can they clinically not prescribe but dispense medications that a doctor has prescribed in various situations? Same with research and doing a PhD is that can you independently research on your own from a project? And that is university recognized. Pretty much, I would say 90% of the university, if not all of them. And if you got any other questions on that, do let me know. But I think that's a really good positive misconception that we have around doing a PhD. So guys, that was it for today's video on 3 misconceptions about having a PhD. And for those who are doing a PhD, I am with you and I know you will get one of these very soon. And if you're struggling, as I mentioned before, do hit me up on a question or DM. More than happy to answer. Remember, I believe in you. It's not if you finish a PhD, it is when. So I'll let you enjoy the rest of your evening and I will catch you in the next video.